Hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Major global banks expect solid growth for the world economy next year, with some even predicting growth to reach 4%. What economic policies drove Korea's growth this year, and what tasks remain as we move into the new year? We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. With this year coming to an end, investment banks have released their growth projections for the global economy in 2018. Overall, it makes good reading, especially for Korea, which is forecast to further cement its position as one of the world's strongest economies. Our Kim Hae-sung starts us off.
2018 looks set to be a year of good economic growth around the globe. According to Bloomberg's investment bank's median estimates, the global economic growth outlook for 2018 is 3.7%. Goldman Sachs and Barclays were the most bullish, predicting global growth to reach 4% next year, which would be the highest since 2011's 4.3%. Banks cited the robust cyclical recovery in the Eurozone and stronger growth in the U.S., backed by tax cuts and increased government spending to bolster global growth. Advanced economy solid economic growth is expected to increase global oil demand, giving a boost to Gulf Cooperation Council countries. Banks forecast those countries, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and others, to see a rebound from this year's 0.8% to 2.3% next year. China, which has been the driver of the global economy, is expected to see slower growth next year, a fall from this year's 6.8% to 6.4% as the country works to rein in growing debt and oversupply. South Korea, however, is set to see its growth momentum continue and hit around 3% again in 2018. South Korea has enjoyed solid economic growth on the back of its strong exports. Quarterly data released by the OECD on Monday showed South Korea's third-quarter real GDP recording 1.5%, the third highest in the G20. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
And as mentioned in that report, it's been a great third quarter for Korea's economy, logging the largest on-quarter GDP growth among the G20 nations. But the economy might need a further boost in order to carry the momentum into and throughout next year. Our Eunice Kim reports.
According to the OECD's quarterly data on Monday, real GDP in the G20 grew by 1% in the third quarter, the same rate as in the previous quarter, but with wide variation across member nations. Out of the G20 club, Korea logged the biggest on-quarter rise in its growth rate, with its economy expanding 1.5% compared to 0.6% in the second quarter. The country's Q3 growth rate came in third among the G20, following China at 1.7% and India at 1.6%. The OECD noted strong growth acceleration in Korea and to a lesser extent in India and Germany. There were marginal growth gains in Italy and the United Kingdom, while those of Indonesia and the United States were seen to be stable. Other member nations like Turkey, Russia, Canada, Brazil, and Mexico saw their growth rates fall from the previous quarter. At the bottom tier, economic contraction was seen in Australia, South Africa, China, Japan, and France. While Korea's Q3 export figures were impressive, it was viewed as a one-off effect due to the long Thanksgiving holiday that began in October, forcing most exporters to ship out their goods by the end of September. Experts speculate that the overall growth rate for 2017 could top 3%, but may retreat back to the 2% range in 2018, suggesting the need to boost domestic demand as a way to preserve growth momentum. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
The Korean government has designated 13 key areas of investment to boost the local economy. According to the Ministry of Science and ICT, these innovative growth engines include big data, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, drones, intelligent robots, and renewable energy. These sectors are expected to aid the creation of more than 550,000 jobs. The goal for now is to set aside around $7.5 billion to support these industries by the year 2022. Detailed plans will be drawn up in March. Religious groups here in Korea will lose their tax-exempt status starting from next year. The move was sealed on Tuesday when the cabinet signed off on the government's new tax code revision. Compensation received from religious services, including voluntary work provided by clergy members, could be recognized as part of their income and taxed in a similar way to income taxes. According to the National Finance Institute, taxing religious groups could add more than $55 million to state coffers each year. Some religious organizations, such as the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church of Korea, have already been paying taxes voluntarily. Following the Bank of Korea's decision to raise its key policy rate last month, we're also seeing changes in the lending rate among commercial banks. The variable interest rate on mortgage loans reached nearly 5%, adding more weight to the repayment burden being faced by Korean borrowers. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
The Cost of Funds Index, or COFIX, a major reference point for banks in determining their interest rates on adjustable rate mortgages, have risen for the third consecutive month in November. The Korean Federation of Banks says the COFIX rose by 0.15 percentage points to nearly 1.8% last month, the biggest jump in more than 6.5 years. This is mainly due to the rate hikes by the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of Korea in recent months, which have prompted local banks to raise their adjustable rates on mortgages to nearly 5%. In times like this, experts advise those who have already incurred debt to refrain from borrowing more money.
This goes for all individuals, households, and companies that are in debt to abstain from incurring additional debt since interest rates are being raised.
For those that have to apply for a loan, the expert recommends choosing a fixed interest rate rather than an adjustable one if one can't repay the loan within 3 years, and switch to the latter depending on how fast the BOK will raise rates next year, as well as commission fees. Normally, a variable interest rate is higher than fixed rates. When applying for an adjustable rate, it's recommended to choose the balance amount instead of loan amount as the standard for applying the interest rate. The BOK raised its benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage point to 1.5% in November, the first rate hike in nearly 7 years, putting it on level terms with U.S. interest rates. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
So it's the last week of 2017, and looking back, this year was quite a year for Korea's economy. The government is expecting Asia's fourth largest economy to grow by more than 3% this year, its best performance since 2014. This on the back of surging exports and a recovering global economy. And today, we're going to take a look at what economic policies led Korea's growth this year, as well as factors that provided headwinds at the same time.
Korea's economy hit a turning point this year as President Moon Jae-in took office in May and called for people-centered growth, also known as J-nomics. Moon's economic policies focused on 3 main objectives. First, creating quality jobs. Second, bolstering the social safety net. And third, reforming Korea's family-controlled business groups, otherwise known as the chaebols. With these goals in mind, the new government announced plans to hike the minimum wage, offer regular jobs to irregular workers, while increasing the budget for welfare and education. However, these goals were not so easy to reach, as rival parties wrangled over the related bills at the National Assembly. But when looking at the overall economy, the country had quite a good year, especially in the semiconductor sector. Chip makers were the main drivers of Korea's economic growth this year, with Samsung Electronics surpassing US rival Intel to become the global market leader for the first time in 25 years. However, experts say the booming semiconductor sector has created few new jobs, while expressing concerns that the industry's success is masking weaknesses in other areas of the economy. Another cause of worries has been growing trade protectionism in the US, as well as China's economic retaliations over Seoul's deployment of a THAAD missile defense system. The Korea-US FTA is about to undergo renegotiations, while tensions remain between Seoul and Beijing, despite their agreement to end their standoff over the THAAD controversy. So, with all these variables in mind, what awaits the Korean economy in the coming new year?
And to tell us more about this, Professor Seok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so this year, President Moon Jae-in's economic policy was largely focused on people-centered and income-led growth. So what's your general assessment of President Moon's economic policy for this year?
Okay, well, President Moon's policy is basically income support and job creation policies. These are not unusual policies. They're used in macroeconomic policies all the time. But President Moon has been calling these growth policies. They're not quite growth policies as economists see it. These income support and job creation policies are usually seen as macroeconomic policies designed to lessen the effect of a recession. So when a recession occurs, the number of jobs falls, so we're lessening the effect of that. The income falls, we're lessening the effect of that. If you want to actually increase wages, increase long-term good jobs, high-quality jobs, what we think is needed is increase in productivity. And the President Moon's economic policies, except for some aspects dealing with fourth industrial revolution, is really demand-oriented income support policies rather than growth policies. That is a bit worrying because that means that we don't have a really long-term growth policies in place, but you can understand why President Moon decided to go with these policies because, well, the growth policies in the last couple of administrations have not done very well.
Right.
So I think he was putting more emphasis on short-term economic recovery rather than long-term economic growth. But since the economy is recovering, I think they should start looking at a more long-term type of growth policies, such as regulatory reform and research and development.
Now, the government does expect the Korean economy to grow in the 3% range next year as well, while some say that next year's growth is likely to slow down compared to this year. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, we have been lucky in two aspects this year. The first is that the global economy has picked up, so our exports has risen greatly. And then the second lucky factor is that we had two supplementary budgets last year and this year. And according to KDI, the supplementary budget, the effects from them comes over about 2 or 3 years. And in fact, the biggest effect actually seems to come at the second year. So we're getting the effect from two supplementary budgets, one from last year, one from this year. And so the second largest contributor to the third quarter growth was actually government expenditure. Now, next year, we probably won't be able to have a supplementary budget. We won't have that hit from a new supplementary budget, but hopefully the global recovery will continue and it will pick up. And in the past, what usually happened is that when there's more exports, we have more consumption and investment. So that'll pick up where the supplementary budget did its effect this year.
Now, I think we can say that semiconductors definitely led this growth, but some are saying that what's concerning is that only a few number of conglomerates might have led this growth in semiconductors.
Okay, well, it is true that semiconductors really had a fantastic year. But if you look at the export items, we actually did fairly well across the board.
Okay.
Now, last year it was such a bad year for exports that on some industries we only recovered from last year's negative growth, but still almost all sectors did feel a recovery of the exports. And if the global recovery continues, then possibly the other industries will pick up as well. Now, there is some specific problems in specific industries. The shipbuilding, because we did not have any orders last year, and because shipbuilding takes about 2 or 3 years, next year there will have some problems. Automobiles, even if the global automobile industry recovers, there's some problems about Korean models. Apparently, they're not selling well because, not necessarily because there's no demand, but there's not SUVs that are ready for global customers.
Okay.
So those type of structural problems do exist, but on the whole, I think things are looking pretty good.
And of course, there are still worries over the country's massive household debt as well as a continuous decrease in real household income.
Okay, well, the principal problem is that Korea does have very low labor productivity, especially in services. So until we deal with labor productivity, we will probably not get a very high rise in income. And how do we raise productivity? Well, the usual cure seems to be regulatory reform, better technology, but also we have to keep in mind things like more competition, because some of the larger companies tend to squeeze out the intermediate goods suppliers. That's one of the reasons why SME pay is not good. And then there's also some problems with price controls. Government doesn't want to let the prices of some necessities go up, but you cannot pay people unless you have enough revenues, and if you keep the prices low, they're not going to have very large revenues.
Right.
So that's also part of the problem.
Now, trade was good this year, though, because Korea ranked 6th in the world in overall exports as exports continue to rise. So what are some of the factors that could affect Korea's trade next year?
Okay, the biggest factor, I think, is whether the global recovery will continue. Because, well, we had problems with protectionism in the past, we had problems with exchange rates in the past, but usually Korea did fairly well. But when the global economy slowed down, Korean exports slowed down. So I think the primary factor is whether the global recovery will continue, and then we can worry about the other factors, such as whether Korea will have a strong won, or whether U.S. protectionism will go up, or whether we'll have a continuation of THAAD retaliation. But I think those are relatively minor compared to whether the global recovery will continue. And the good news seems to be that all the major economic regions seem to be very optimistic this year.
All right, then what can we expect in the year 2018 in terms of Korea's economic policies, as well as what are some of the internal and external factors that could affect growth in 2018?
Okay, looking at a cracked crystal ball, I think 3% growth is possible. It'll be, I think, around there. But I think whether we will achieve somewhere beyond 3% or below really depends on whether the growth in exports will lead to growth in consumption, domestic consumption and investment. This year, it's been a bit disappointing, but we haven't really noticed it as much because government consumption has been so high. But next year, we won't have the supplementary budget. So we need that consumption and investment to pick up if you want to maintain this high growth trend. Luckily, it seems to be picking up, but if you compare it historically, it's growing slower than it used to in the past when exports went up, domestic consumption and investment went up. But it's been slower this year. But hopefully, if it'll be slow, then maybe it'll be solid next year. If we have a solid recovery in consumption, then I think we can achieve 3% or more.
All right, let's hope for better conditions next year. Thank you so much for the wrap-up and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Let's get a quick check on how the equity markets fared here in Seoul on this first trading day after Christmas. A divergent picture for Korea's major bourses as foreign investors mostly remained on the sidelines. At the closing bell, the Kospi index was down 0.5% to finish at 2427.34 on the back of aggressive retail investor selling. The junior Kosdaq was just 0.13% stronger to 762.21. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean won strengthened against the greenback to 1076.11. Large caps on the main bourse were mixed. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix shares were more than 3% weaker, while Naver tracked up 1.39%. Asian markets at large were mixed as well amid the light end of the year trade. Japan's Nikkei was slightly down, while China's Shanghai Composite was higher in late afternoon trade. Markets over in Hong Kong, Australia, and New Zealand remained closed on this Tuesday. Korea's junior Kosdaq index is having a year to remember. Total trading volume on the tech-heavy bourse has surpassed $813 billion so far this year, already posting the highest annual growth since the market opened in 1996. According to the Korea Exchange, the Kosdaq topped its previous record set in 2015 on the back of bullishness in biotech-related shares. Market watchers are also optimistic that the Kosdaq will have a big 2018 after the index topped the 800 mark for the first time earlier this month. Apple is in hot water after it admitted to deliberately slowing down older iPhone models. The tech giant says it did so to make aging batteries last longer, but consumers are not convinced and lawsuits are now on the way. Our Park Ji-won has more.
In the U.S., iPhone owners from several states, including Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, and North Carolina, filed lawsuits against Apple in federal courts in Chicago and Los Angeles late last week. They claim Apple violated consumer fraud laws by staying silent on the deliberate slowing down of their devices to push them to buy newer, more expensive iPhones. They also claim that the tech giant company never requested consent from users about the slowdowns of their iPhones, and users didn't give consent to the company to interfere with their devices. The complaints have spread to Israel, with users filing a $125 million class action lawsuit against Apple on Monday for breaching its basic duties toward users by failing to disclose that software updates would have a negative impact on the performance of their phones. Apple officially announced last week that the software updates were meant to fix the irregularities of the older smartphone models and to prevent the devices from unexpectedly shutting down. iPhone 6, 6S, SE, and iPhone 7 models have been affected by the software update. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
A joint team of researchers from Korea and the U.S. have developed a way to transfer huge amounts of data across the internet at mind-boggling speeds. It could make a huge contribution to future scientific research, with the added benefit of allowing ordinary users to download their favorite TV shows even faster. Our Lee Joo-young has the story.
Researchers in Korea and the United States have joined arms to develop cutting-edge technology that can send massive amounts of data at a tremendous speed. With the development of big science, data volume has increased at an exponential rate, making the production, mode of storage, and transmission of data more important than ever. The data size in bio and space science is too massive to be managed in a single institution. Open science, which forms various research cooperation networks, is a possible solution to this problem. The CERN particle accelerator, which is run by the European Organization for Nuclear Research responsible for the discovery of Higgs particle, is a case in point.
With a middleware that allows data to be transmitted easily, we've created a favorable environment for researchers to analyze scientific data.
To put that into better perspective, this technology can send 50 gigabits of data, the equivalent of 50 drama episodes, from the Korean city of Daejeon to Chicago in just 90 seconds. This is currently the world's fastest data transfer rate and is 3 times faster than the current technology.
We need technology and infrastructure that supports one data source to be transferred to scientists. That's the technology we're working on here.
With this development, the future looks bright for research in various fields at the forefront of cutting-edge technology. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
A team of Korean researchers have developed a micro-robot equipped with stem cells for medical use, which they hope to put into wider commercial use. Our Park Se-young tells us more.
This micro-robot is equipped with stem cells which regenerate cartilage. After injecting the tiny robot near a joint, the researchers control it using magnetic fields until it arrives at the desired location. This new technology allows the quick delivery of stem cells.
Thousands of stem cells go into the roughly 0.3 millimeter robot. Using electromagnetic fields from outside, the doctor can accurately attach the stem cells to damaged areas.
The existing method of injecting stem cells using syringes delivers only about 10% of the cells to the desired destination. Microrobots can deliver over 90% of stem cells to the targeted area within 10 minutes. This technology has been transferred to a biotech startup to enter overseas markets. The researchers will continue their study so that the robots can be used for a wider range of illnesses. Park Se-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.